Hello and welcome. Welcome to Everything is Energy. Welcome to the full moon in Scorpio, which is exact on May 1st, 2026 at 10:23 a.m. Pacific time. This full moon takes place with the moon at 11 degrees of Scorpio. Scorpio being fixed feminine water ruled by Pluto. And as is the case with all full moons, this full moon is directly opposing the sun at 11 degrees of Taurus. And Taurus, instead of fixed feminine water like Scorpio, Taurus is fixed feminine earth, ruled by Venus. So it's interesting to have an opposition of fixed feminine energies and have that opposition be water versus earth. This signals to us that this is a deeply embodied full moon because Scorpio and Taurus are not abstract signs, they are visceral signs. They speak to survival, attachment, desire, security, power, and transformation. And as they are directly opposed to each other in the zodiac, there's an axis there. This axis is one of holding and releasing, of what we cling to and what must evolve. And let's take a moment to just kind of unpack this a little bit. The sun in Taurus represents stability. It represents the material world, what we value, what we hold on to, as well as our physical body. And as I mentioned, Taurus is ruled by Venus, fixed feminine earth, and as such is deeply connected to our senses, to pleasure, to comfort, and to physical security. Opposing this, the moon, which is in her full glory in Scorpio, fixed feminine water, this represents emotional depth. Scorpio ruled by Pluto is very comfortable with transformation and things unseen, as well as the energetic layers, the psychological and emotional layers beneath this physical world that we somehow still feel so beholden to. And Scorpio, well, it's worth noting, traditionally Scorpio was ruled by Mars, but it was when Pluto was discovered that Pluto came to rule Scorpio. And that was with the invention of things like telescopes that enabled us to see planets that were beyond what we could see with the naked eye. And Pluto was the planet of karma. Pluto was the planet of death and rebirth and transformation. So this opposition is a very key feature of this chart. There's another super key feature here that I'll get to. There's a couple things that are really wonderful, but this opposition, it really asks us to to spend some time with the themes of, what are we holding on to for security that may actually be limiting our evolution? What lies beneath the surface of what feels quote unquote stable? Also, what is ready to change, even if it feels slightly uncomfortable? And it's worth remembering that full moons illuminate. Full moons are times when things come to be seen, and Scorpio illuminates what is hidden. So this is a really wonderful theme for this juncture on our planet. As we very well know, we are living and moving through times of massive transformation. And this question of, what in our world are we still beholding to that may actually be limiting us. And it doesn't mean that we need to be punished. It doesn't have to be anything super huge. It might be, but it might also just be this kind of, if we're talking about what's beneath the surface, if we're talking about energetic layers, beneath the physical layer, the emotional, psychological, energetic layer, not necessarily beneath, but in our consciousness, it feels that way. This is a really potent moon for us to kind of maybe even take a deep breath. And just like when you exhale and that release feels so viscerally good, there's the potential for just some shifts that we might be able to let go and lean in at the same time. And now I want to come on to what I believe is the most powerful configuration in the chart for this full moon, and that is the finger of God. We have a yod. We not only have a yod, we have the moon in Scorpio at the apex of the yod, which is often called the finger of God. And his name is as it sounds. It speaks to energetic forces afoot that are potentially guiding us in ways that some aspects of our consciousness understand, but maybe our fundamental mundane consciousness isn't quite tapped into. And a yacht is formed by two planets that are in sextile. This is the moon is at the apex, and these other two planets are quincunx each other. And so we have the moon at the apex of this yod. And this is creating a sense of destiny as well as adjustment and redirection. And, at the base, we have Venus on one side conjunct Aldebaran in the sign of Gemini. I mentioned Venus and Uranus just dipped into Gemini. Venus only spends about a month in a sign. So, right now, for the purposes of this yod, Venus is about harmony and justice and balance and love and relationship and values. And Aldebaran is one of the four royal stars in Persian astrology. It is associated with honor, with integrity, and with success through alignment with truth. And that's a really potent energy for the times that we live in. And having these guys in Gemini, the sign of the twins, but, a sign of communication, a sign of, as I was speaking of with, Uranus moving into Gemini, the twins can kind of look like they represent duality, two people looking in exact opposite directions. But really what the twins reminds us of is it's not just a one and done, that potentially all sides matter. And so Gemini is very much about perception, and it's curious about narratives, not just having one tightly knit narrative, but all narratives. And so this conjunction suggests that values and relationships are being shaped through truth, truth in communication. And I apologize, guys. I live on a farm and my hens are laying eggs. So while I move through the talking points of the astrology, you're going to hear some beautiful hens in the background. By the time we get to the meditation, they will have gone quiet. So let's just continue on with this yod. So we have at one part of the base, we have Venus and Aldebaran. And the other part of the base, this quincunx between Venus and Aldebaran, is with Saturn. And Saturn is in the sign of Aries. While Saturn is often thought of as a restrictive sign, it does represent structure. It's very much a karmic planet, slightly different than Pluto, though, in the sense that it really wants us to manifest in the physical world. And if we think about Saturn and Aries, Aries is cardinal masculine fire. So this is about, if Saturn is about structure and responsibility and karmic lessons, Aries is going to be about our identity, about initiation, and about action. So this is interesting because a quincunx signals tension. That's the base of the yod. And so the tension is between, Venus in Gemini, which is about relational truth, and Saturn in Aries, which is about personal responsibility and identity. And so there might be this sense that there's something more to be unpacked within those themes. And how do we come to understand what that something more is? Well, we have the apex of this yod. Very fortunate to have all of this funneling into the moon in Scorpio. So this means that our emotional body is very much going to be a an antenna, a tuning fork, if you will, towards what needs adjusting. This is the place where we're going to be able to perceive this tension between our relational truth, Venus and Gemini, and our personal responsibility and our identity, Saturn and Aries. And with the moon at the apex, this is all suggesting that this is a moment where our emotional truth is an essential part of our own path and of the healing of the collective. And this very much represents a turning point. And the turning point might be just some internal connection and something that clicks in within ourselves. It might be a way that we slightly, subtly reorient our expression of ourselves outwardly. But regardless, the realizations that are happening during this full moon with this yod, these are realizations that shift direction. And so let's get also to some other aspects, some other themes about what's shifting for us here. We have Jupiter in Cancer squaring a stellium of planets in Aries. Not only do we have Saturn in Aries, we have a large concentration of planets in Aries. We have Mars in addition to Saturn. We have Eris and Mercury and Chiron and Neptune. That's still a fair amount of Aries energy. We've been in just moving through Aries season. We're out of Aries season, but there's still a lot of personal empowerment energy here. And, Jupiter in Cancer, Jupiter is expansion, Jupiter is growth, Jupiter is meaning. In Cancer, it's about our emotional well-being, nurturing, belonging, feeling like we have a sense of place and space. And mythologically, Jupiter is Zeus. Jupiter is the sky god, and this is the god of expansion, authority, and divine order. So Jupiter in Cancer is really about emotional expansion. Expansion by attuning to what our emotional sensors are telling us. And so this kind of holds hands nicely with the yod. But let's get to the fact that this is a squaring action. Jupiter is squaring Saturn in Aries. And this is very much a classic tension. If Jupiter is expansion and Saturn is contraction, this tension between them right now is potentially as old as astrology itself. But it's interesting because Mars is active here with Aries, and Mars is also in Aries. And so, if we've still got this squaring energy, this is, going to signal for us to take a breath with Mars and Aries before we simply react, right? We're not seeking to be impulsive here. And Jupiter is not only squaring Saturn, Jupiter is also, even though Saturn and Mars aren't conjunct, Jupiter's squaring Saturn, Jupiter is squaring Mars, Jupiter is squaring Mercury, Jupiter is squaring Eris, Jupiter is squaring Chiron. Jupiter is squaring all of those, in case I wasn't clear about that. So this means that this expansion path is very personal for us, right? As Mars and Aries is the I am energy. It's also squaring Chiron and Eris. Chiron is, I'll skip his myth because I've told it a lot before. But it's really about turning our wounds into wisdom, personally and collectively. And Eris, I've told her myth a bunch of times. She is disruption for the sake of inclusion. She disrupts when there are things in our world and in our society where ego is overly involved. Eris is about, she's known as the street fighter. She throws the golden apple into the wedding on Mount Olympus. She's the only god that's not invited, goddess. And she throws the golden apple in and says to the fairest, and all the beautiful goddesses squabble, and all their suitors squabble, and the Trojan War begins. And so it's interesting because Jupiter is this squaring action with Jupiter is amplifying these energies, this Chiron and Eris energy. So, but this isn't bad. This is about awareness of our emotional past wounds, but it's not about fearing that. It's about embracing the path that we're on as evolving beings, knowing that we are never stuck and we don't necessarily ever need to repeat anything. We just need to be attuned and present in the moment with what is going on. This also, though, that would be the Chiron aspect of this squaring. The Eris aspect of that square is collective disruption around identity. And that's an interesting one because if we're talking about, previously I mentioned this idea of some things shaking loose that we might not even know that need to shake loose and releasing some old things that we may be holding on to in order to get to where we really want to be. There's an interesting clue there about collective disruption around identity. Let's remember disruption is a word that I often associate with Uranus. Disruption is not bad. Disruption is not chaos. Disruption is not loss. If we think about what Eris does, she disrupts for the purpose of really harmonizing the collective for the good of all. So this disruption is more like a wave that's washing through. And if you think about the way a wave can disrupt a calm lake or a calm body of water, it's not necessarily throwing water everywhere, but it is moving things. Now, I also want to touch on this square because Jupiter is also, as I mentioned, squaring Mercury and Neptune. And Mercury is a planet of the mind. It's about our 3D communication, especially. Neptune, the planet of illusion and delusion, is dissolving and dissolving boundaries. And Jupiter is expanding both here. So this means that this full moon very much can bring insight, but also it's okay if it brings confusion because both are potential. And again, let's remember that confusion isn't forever. It might just be in Neptunian fashion. Illusion and delusion are when the curtain falls and we are able to see something that we might not have been able to see before. And so I kind of want to integrate this for a second. This entire squaring action between all these planets and Jupiter and Cancer, all these planets in Aries and Jupiter and Cancer. This is, really kind of signaling that emotional growth right now might manifest itself in some kind of a challenge in how we think, how we act, and how we define ourselves. And there might very well be a little bit of pressure that we can feel during this week before and after this lunation. But let's remember that the pressure is actually creating movement. And if we're thinking about the disruption of that wave, it's just about shifting things. It doesn't have to be that it's super duper dramatic. As I mentioned, it can be, but it might just be that it's a reset of sorts. And now we also have the moon square to Pluto. Squaring Pluto, which is Pluto is conjunct Juno, and they're both in Aquarius. So this is the moon in Scorpio squaring Pluto in Aquarius. And this is another powerful aspect. Pluto is about death and rebirth. It's about transforming power systems. Juno is about sacred agreements, commitment, what it feels and means to be in partnership, not just romantic partnership, but partnership with our earth, with each other, with everything around us. And, Aquarius, I like to think of as circular power. It's about collective systems. It's about innovation. It's about community. So this particular square of the moon with Pluto and Juno, this is about, it's suggesting some emotional intensity because we have the Scorpio moon. But this emotional intensity is meeting a deep transformation in our relationships and our agreements, our contracts, potentially our sacred social contracts. So that means that this lunation can very well bring power dynamics into awareness. It can also create transformations in our collective commitments and agreements. And it can create shifts in those structures, in those communities. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because we're moving through this wave of disruption, and ultimately it's all an upgrade. So finally, the one last aspect I want to touch on here is we have Uranus conjunct Sedna and Priapus. And while this conjunction, Uranus and Sedna, is going to be exact on May 24th, and I will do an entirely separate deep dive podcast about that. This conjunction is definitely operational right now. And, if Uranus is the planet that's the lightning bolt of disruption, excuse me. Uranus is the planet of awakening and innovation. Uranus reminds us that we are the change. We are the high technology that we seek. Sedna is an Inuit goddess, which is, her stories about betrayal, as well as, transformation and rebirth. And she becomes the goddess of fertility for the Inuit people. She becomes the goddess that creates all the life that lives beneath the sea. And the sea for the Inuit people is where all their food and all their everything comes from because they live on ice. And Priapus is often understood as the opposite of Black Moon Lilith. And this is a point in space, much like Black Moon Lilith, but it carries a similar theme. It's an amplifying energy. It's about desire. So when we look at the meaning of this conjunction, this is deep. Uranus and Sedna are really inviting an awakening from the depths. And when we add in the energy of Priapus, we're intensifying this energy with an exclamation point. And what this suggests is that what has been hidden or buried beneath the surface is rising. And this is also about, amplifying what is actually true is coming up. And it's also a little bit of a feeling of a memory that we may have. And so I guess to integrate all of this, I would just sort of share that this full moon is not necessarily light, but it's potent, it's powerful, and it's inviting and bringing emotional truth. Also, relational adjustment between us with ourselves, us with our families, us with our communities, communities with communities. This is about collective transformation in the midst of identity tension. And the yod is called the finger of God because it's pointing to destiny, and to have the apex of the yod be the full moon itself in Scorpio. This is just a really wonderful time for realizations. And it's worth remembering that the squares are just, they don't have to be challenges that we fear. They might just be things that happen that create movement in our world. And the conjunctions, well, those conjunctions that I mentioned, those are going to deepen the process. So this full moon is really a moment where something shifts, not because we force it, but because we can no longer ignore what is true. And before we get to a meditation, I want to just briefly invite you. I'm going to begin teaching my Astrology 101 course on May 2nd, the day after this full moon. It's a 6-week course. We go live every Saturday. All the materials are online. Everything's recorded. There's the opportunity to book additional time with me if you want to have some support in going over birth charts. I'll put a link to join my email list because that is how I'm offering a discount if you happen to want it to join the course. Okay, so let's get to the meditation now. Find somewhere where you won't be disturbed for the next little bit of time, somewhere where you can be comfortable physically, seated or lying, somewhere where you can close your eyes and begin to allow your body to settle. As you breathe in next, take an inhale through your nose and just naturally start to deepen and lengthen the breath. And as you exhale, release the breath through the mouth. If you can, take a little bit more time on the exhale than the inhale. This will signal for the mind to relax and slow. A couple more breaths here, breathing in through your nose, deep, easy, fluid breath. And releasing through the mouth, taking your time. One more deeper, longer breath. And releasing through the mouth. And as you bring your awareness into this moment and call your consciousness here and now, take a moment to connect with your physical vessel. And maybe you start just by connecting to the top of the head and moving down. If you sense any areas of tension, you can relax your brow, you can loosen your jaw, you can soften your shoulders. And go ahead and bring your awareness down into your hips and your legs. And just really let yourself arrive here and now. And now imagine yourself standing at the edge of a deep, still body of water. This is Scorpio energy. This is the realm of the unseen, the emotional depths, the subconscious. And as you stand at the edge of this body of water, see if you can just kind of dip your toes in there and start to feel that there's nothing to fear here. This water is still, it is safe, it is calm, and you are safe to enter. And when you're ready, if you're ready, in your awareness, just slowly take a step or two into the water. Feel it around your feet. Notice its temperature. Maybe adjust its temperature so it's just right and comfortable for you in this moment. And taking the time that you need, just gently, slowly start to wade into this wonderfully still body of water. Feel the water around your legs, around your body. And let yourself enter into this body of water as much as you feel comfortable. If you'd like to, you can float and feel yourself held. But there is no rush here. This is only about personal truth. Scorpio does not move quickly, it moves deeply. And as you arrive in this still body of water, feeling the water connect to you. And if you're floating, this might be easier to do, but see if you can just kind of relax and surrender here to this water. And as you relax and surrender a little bit more, notice what happens. Your body floats, becomes more buoyant with the surrender. This is not something we're forcing here. And as you're floating and being held by this water, just invite or allow something to arise. Again, we're not forcing, we're just allowing. Maybe something that has been waiting, maybe a feeling, a truth, maybe a pattern or a memory. And just simply observe it, whatever is coming into your awareness. And invite this illumination with and in sync with the energy of the full moon. And as you're in this body of water, potentially floating, imagine just a soft beam of light above you, a point of focus. This is the finger of God. This is the moment of redirection, the place where something can shift. And as this light just gently beams down on you as you're floating in this water, invite this light, to illuminate anything that you might be holding onto unnecessarily. And you might gently ask, what is ready to change? Or what is ready to be released? And now either imagine or go ahead and actually do it. Take a nice deep exhale through the mouth. And as you exhale, just intend and invite and allow what you have been holding on to dissolve into the water. And as you release into the water, just also feel simultaneously that you don't need to carry this forward. Scorpio teaches us, reminds us that release is power, that transformation is power. And we are reclaiming that power. And now, after that release, in this space that remains, see if you can start to sense or even energetically feel something returning to you. Your energy, your clarity, your truth. And maybe bring your awareness to your solar plexus or your heart or both, and just silently repeat internally or aloud as you're floating in this water, I reclaim my energy. I reclaim my energy. I reclaim my truth. I reclaim my truth. I trust the transformation unfolding. I trust the transformation that is unfolding. And now, as you're floating in the water, let your feet start to move towards the sandy bottom of the lake and gently begin to rise up out of the water. And imagine yourself coming to stand on the edge of that vast, still body of water. And then, just in your own awareness of this moment here and now, begin to bring your awareness back into your physical vessel, your body in this moment. Back to the experience of your breath. Take a nice deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And take a moment to begin to connect to the space and the place around you. And before you open your eyes, potentially set the intention to take this energy, this moment of truth, this moment of release and activation, reorientation, transformation with you. Maybe also feel yourself shifted, that you are not the same, that you have moved through and released something, and that that is what you can carry with you. Thank you, as always, for joining me. Thank you to the hundreds and hundreds of countries and thousands of people who were collectively weaving and co-creating this web of light at this moment and this time on our planet that is just so powerful. And this is about all of us collectively birthing, rebirthing, creating together. I'm grateful for you. Have a wonderful, blessed Scorpio full moon, and I will see you soon. Blessings and love.